When you have a more diverse and inclusive and agile workforce, you're able to truly be more innovative and solve problems quicker and more complete and with accuracy. And that's exactly what we need right now, to leverage principles of DEI and A so that we can solve our 21st century problems that are very unique today.
If you think about America today, it's a diverse landscape full of different people with different backgrounds and experiences. According to the Census Bureau, our population is aging, with all race and ethnicity groups growing between 2020 and 2021, except the white population. Gallup found that 7.1% of Americans identify as LGBTQIA+, and the CDC finds that 1 in 4 Americans live with a disability. In this nation filled with all of these different identities, we need to ensure that our government can meet the different needs of such a diverse population and have policies which reflect who the people of our country are. Fortunately, our leadership has acknowledged this need. President Joe Biden signed an executive order in 2021 to weave diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, or DEIA, into the federal workforce. Since, chief diversity officers have become government-wide roles, and training, guidance, policies, programs, and a slew of other great initiatives have started rolling out to ensure that our government reflects the different faces and minds of this country. DEIA in federal work and in our society overall is so important, especially amid the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling rejecting affirmative action. So I'm excited to share that this is the first of a 2-part episode we're bringing to you that breaks down DEIA in our federal workforce. In this first part, we're building a foundation by breaking down the high-level strides of Biden's executive order. One of the key agencies working at that high level to meet the requirements of the EO is OPM, the Office of Personnel and Management. For those who may not know, OPM leads human resource management across the federal government. OPM builds, strengthens, and supports programs for federal employees like hiring assistance, healthcare and insurance, and retirement benefits. And it also recruits and trains the federal workforce. Lots of these different responsibilities are central to making DEIA implementation successful across federal agencies. I'm Melissa Harris, and today on Empathy Affect, the Forsmarsh Media podcast that explores the human side of government, we'll learn about how OPM is meeting the executive order's call to strengthen the federal workforce with DEIA. With us is OPM's Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility Director, Dr. Janice Underwood. While we held this conversation before the SCOTUS ruling on affirmative action, our conversation still highlights how she's a powerhouse, coordinating with top DEIA leadership in government. She and other federal DEIA leaders are helping our agencies harness the diverse talent and expertise needed to make our government work for us. Dr. Underwood, thank you for joining us on Empathy Effect.
Thank you for having me.
Sure thing. I just want to tee things off a little bit here, breaking down OPM and getting to know the government-wide CDO role. So can you start by giving us a little introduction about your agency and what OPM is doing to lead the journey around DEIA in government? And also a little bit more about the government-wide CDO role, since from what I understand, it's a relatively new position.
Well, Melissa, I am super excited to be here today to talk about the government-wide Chief Diversity Officer role and really the work that we're doing in the Biden-Harris administration in support of Executive Order 14035. And part of the work that executive order laid out was creating a U.S. Chief Diversity Officer Executive Council. And while we did that, it created the functional role of government-wide Chief Diversity Officer. So I helped to lead the council and provide support to all of the Chief Diversity Officers at the federal level in the executive branch. And in effect, as we are hiring Chief Diversity Officers across the landscape, The U.S. Office of Personnel Management provides technical assistance to these agencies as they develop their DEIA plans, as they implement their plans, and as they measure their progress. So the Office of DEI&A is really here from a government-wide perspective, looking outward across the federal landscape to say, how can we help you? How can we help you talk about DEIA in your agencies? How can we help you implement strategies that really leverage DEIA principles so that we can improve agency operations and in turn create a better workforce for the American people so that we can make our services accessible and equitable to the folks that we serve, which are you and your listeners.
How did you get interested in DEIA in the first place, especially in government? I know that before you were the state of Virginia's first ever chief diversity officer, and now you find yourself at OPM, sort of being the hub of all the spokes to the other agencies. What drove you to want to work in this field?
Well, the DEI and A or DEIB or JEDI space is a relatively new space as we think about it from the perspective of government. However, when I was in Virginia, I was the top diversity voice for the Commonwealth of Virginia. But really, my access point into this work was really from an education equity perspective, applying these principles in the K 12 setting as we endeavored to make high quality STEM learning accessible to all students, including students with disabilities, students for whom English was not their first language. And I was really part of a movement that was squarely focused on how do we also prepare teachers and educators across the spectrum in STEM fields and special education to really get nationally board certified, and how do we even reform teacher preparation programs towards principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so really my entire career has been squarely focused on DEI and DEI and A in higher ed, and that's what led me to the governor's office. And now I have the great opportunity, given the amazing success we had in Governor Northam's office, leading the equity strategy of the One Virginia plan and all the work that we did to build capacity for the Commonwealth of Virginia. And by the way, one, the best state for which to do business because of our equity strategies. We supported 5 other governor's offices in creating this role at the governor's office level. And what we're seeing is that now that they've created those roles, they are building capacity and innovation. North Carolina built the role, reached out to me when I was in the governor's office in Virginia in 2021. And by the way, they won the best state for which to do business right after Virginia. And so, we see that there is a truly benefit to this work. So there is a business imperative that cannot be denied. That led me to OPM, and I am so incredibly honored, and it is truly not lost on me that I get to be the top CDO voice for the nation now, as we are reckoning with all of these topics, in this ethos, in this climate. But I can't not say that this is really in partnership with our other interagency partners, such as the EEOC, the Office of Management and Budget, and the Domestic Policy Council. And so I truly do link arms with them, and together we are implementing and operationalizing and measuring our impact on DEI&A at the federal level.
That's so important. And it's been great hearing about the arc of your journey here from education, state to federal. And it may seem obvious, but what does it mean to have those different backgrounds and experiences at the table when we're delivering on our government's mission?
There are 1,000 white papers that corroborate what I'm about to say, and I'll just quickly suggest and share with you a lot of their findings. When you have a more diverse and inclusive and agile workforce, you're able to truly be more innovative and solve problems quicker and more complete and with accuracy. And that's exactly what we need right now to leverage principles of DEI and A so that we can solve our 21st century problems that are very unique today. And so we must draw on the full diversity of our nation in our American workforce so that we can serve the American people who also are very diverse. And when we do that, there is both a business imperative in terms of improving our daily operations and our organizational outcomes, but also there's a national security imperative for our country. And so, really excited about the work, for example, that the government wide chief diversity officer for the intelligence community, my friend and colleague Stephanie LaRue, is doing for all the intelligence community agencies. And so, together, we are building ultimately a better workforce for you, the American people.
Absolutely. And seeing you and your colleagues carve out this work has made an impact in making our government more inclusive and equitable. We'll get to the federal level work in a moment, but while in Virginia, you used your seat and expertise in this work to help shape the state's response to the Black Lives Matter racial justice movement, right?
It's a little known fact that in the Commonwealth of Virginia, when we saw the calls for racial equity and the protests around the world, I was in a I was in a pretty powerful seat. And as I realized and I watched my own children wanting to go protest and demand fairness and justice, I realized that all those folks who were protesting did not have a seat at the table. And so it was incumbent upon me to use my power and bring some of those protesters in. And that's exactly what I did in Virginia. We brought protesters in to meet with me and the Secretary of Public Safety and the governor. And we brought people from all walks of life who were walking the pavements and demanding justice outside. We brought them into the governor's office and said, tell us what your ideas are. And that helped us in policy making in state government to create one of the most historical equity agendas in the history of the Commonwealth of Virginia. And so there's a place at the table for any and everyone, but I do want to foot stomp that fact that you do need to not only have passion, but you need to have a theoretical framework or strategic plan for which to implement and measure success, because you can't change what you don't measure, and you won't measure that which you don't acknowledge.
That's so true. And clearly, your expertise and passion have now taken you to OPM. Now, a lot of your work is grounded in President Biden's Executive Order 14035, which came around 2 years ago in June 2021 to strengthen the federal workforce by promoting DEIA. And shortly after that came the government wide strategic plan to advance DEIA in the federal workforce. So, what is OPM's role in both the EO and the strategic plan, and how do you sense these things are going after the past 2 years?
Well, I am excited to talk about that question, Melissa, because we are rocking and rolling. We hit the ground running. And so after that government wide strategic plan hit the streets, after we provided those tools and templates to all of our agencies, in the last 2 years, we have supported agencies in the public release of their completed plans. And Melissa, by the way, let me just share with you all of our required CFO Act agencies submitted a plan. And so that's important to know that we're tracking, submitted a plan to our office. And our role at OPM is to work in partnership with our interagency collaborators in the EO, such as the EEOC, the Office of Management and Budget, and our Domestic Policy Council partners. But our role at OPM is to receive their plans and provide direct technical assistance to our CDOs and their offices of DEIA across the landscape. And so, what that has looked like is helping them implement some amazing programming as well as metrics. And the one metric that I have to share with you is our DEIA index. Recently, OPM released our strategic plans, and it showed very publicly that one of my goals is to create a baseline DEI and A index and start measuring the entire federal workforce. By the way, we're the largest employer in the nation. and go to all of our federal employees and say, what are your perceptions of the D, the E, the I, and the A? And we did just that. And in 2022, we released the OPM FEVs. It included separate questions related to each of those letters. And we received our baseline. And what we found is that 69% of the entire federal workforce have favorable responses to our DEI and A index. Now it's up to me and our team to increase that index of 69% by 6 points. And so we have been working so diligently to do that from a government-wide perspective. And some of the activities that we've done in support of that and increase participation in our OPM FEVs and increase that index across the landscape are things like our DEIA National Summit, where we focused on accessibility and elevated the A outside of the D, the E, and the I, and said, how can we increase a whole of government approach for disability employment across all levels of government and uniquely focusing on the federal government? So we joined the top thought leaders in the nation to help our federal agencies to really think about what are the policies and practices, formal and informal, that they could adopt that would increase people with disabilities having access to federal jobs. And how do we get the word out that, hey, the federal government is hiring and we want you to apply at usajobs.gov. Let me say it again, Melissa, to your listeners. We want you. Please go to usajobs.gov and at least create a profile so we can search you and you can identify roles that maybe you're interested in.
Yeah, thank you for that plug. I feel like you could be our official ad sponsor one day. So I know we touched on some steps that are really big. The summit you mentioned, the groundwork you set between 2021 and 2022. Are there other milestones that OPM has hit in meeting the government-wide strategic plan's vision? I know we haven't gotten to chat about the Chief Diversity Officer's Executive Council, which is really big. So could you perhaps speak about that?
Absolutely. The U.S. Chief Diversity Officer Executive Council, or what we call the CDOEC, is an amazing example of building coalitions and truly operationalizing the spirit of EO 14035. I serve as the government-wide Chief Diversity Officer as part of the leadership on the council, and currently the council is chaired by our very own Director of OPM, Kiran Ahuja. Our vice chairs are from EEOC, Chair Charlotte Burrows of the EEOC, and our second vice chair is Deputy Director Jason Miller from OMB, Office of Management and Budget. And together, the four of us really provide leadership to all of the CDOs on the council. The goal or the purpose of the council, to your point, is really to help CDOs who are, by the way, at all different levels in small agencies, medium agencies. Some CDOs are at very large agencies, cabinet level agencies, across the CFO Act agencies. They are also at different levels of leadership. Some are reporting directly to a secretary, some are not reporting at maybe to a deputy secretary or at another level in the senior leadership. But because there's so much diversity across the space, we wanted to ensure that every CDO on the council had access to the top senior leaders in government so that they all had a even playing level, so that we could share promising practices and solve problems together that would allow all of us to benefit and all of us to learn and all of us to innovate in real time. So the CDOEC has a brand new website, and I want to encourage all of your listeners to search the CDOEC website, and there you will find our charter that brought us into fruition. And you will learn that the purpose is truly to not only serve as an interagency forum to share best practices and innovate and problem solve, but What we also have done is broken up into 4 working groups, and our working groups are related to DEIA standardization or standards across government, data. How do we leverage data? And so we'll be working with our OPM Chief Data Officer, and we'll be debuting a DEIA dashboard in the coming several months. We have a DEIA policy working group that's really thinking about and reviewing DEIA implications across all policies, and how do we improve the submission of DEIA progress across the federal landscape. And the 4th working group is DEIA learning and training. And so really trying to help our federal CDOs understand what are the promising practices from an instructional design perspective so that we can have the highest quality DEIA learning across the ethos. So together, all CDOs sit on one or more of those working groups and are actually rolling up their sleeves and doing the work.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot standing it up just in 1 year and getting all those groups going, especially all kinds of agencies, small, big. Have you heard any feedback from other CDOs or folks across different agencies indicating how these steps are sort of making a difference or making people feel more included or seen, or where they can bring their authentic selves to the table?
Absolutely. Let me give you an example. We held a national ERG summit or Employee Resource Group summit to help our agencies identify transformative ways, not check the box ways, of how to operationalize their DEIA plans and their White House initiative plans and allow them to synthesize across their agency strategic missions. And that is exactly how we're helping to establish this as a way to leverage best practices or promising practices for DEI principles to improve organizational outcomes. That's exactly what we're doing. And so we've heard from CDOs and other senior DEIA leaders that when we released our gender identity guidance. This was an amazing opportunity for agencies to see what are the promising practices of how they could create or take our OPM gender inclusion document and apply them in their agencies. And this is at a time when we see the attacks on the LGBTQ but we made sure that our gender identity guidance truly was reflective of all gender identities, including those who don't identify in the LGBTQ community, because we wanted to ensure that this document was for everyone. But we hope that it truly serves as an exemplar for any public or private organization to see that we are setting the standard as the employer of choice or as the largest employer in the nation.
One other aspect we've seen with DEIA and building a federal workforce is in a renewed effort to engage with minority serving institutions, or MSIs, from different agencies. We've seen the Department of Homeland Security working to promote cyber roles with historically Black colleges and universities. DoD and HHS have been doing similar initiatives. Is OPM planning to increase efforts to promote government roles to early and mid-career candidates from institutions such as these?
Well, from a macro perspective, OPM has made early career talent outreach a major priority across all institutions, because what we know from a catastrophic perspective, buckle up and hold on to this statistic, less than 7% of the federal workforce is under 30.
Wow.
And so those single digit numbers are frightening for many of us who are thinking about succession planning and strategic planning and how do we prepare our federal workforce to continue to operate optimally. And so that's a dimension of diversity that we're reaching out to from a macro perspective. And yes, OPM is doing a lot of work with regard to MSI or minority serving institutions for your listeners. And we're doing it even beyond HBCUs. We're really going across the landscape and including those who have never largely been included at the table, like community colleges, for example, and going to that early career talent in those underserved communities, particularly in rural areas that don't have access or consistent access to broadband, to go to usajobs.gov. How do we go to them? Because we can't just wait for them to come to us.
Right.
And so just recently in April, we launched the Level Up to Public Service Initiative. And it was a pilot program at Hampton University where we brought the federal government and landed in Hampton, Virginia. And it not only included OPM, but it included about 10 to 12 other federal agencies who came with me and our OPM teams from Employee Services and usajobs.gov teams to say to these truly high performing students, highly qualified students who are ready to think about graduation, consider the federal government as your next step. And we launched there, and it was just such an amazing event. And what we learned from the survey data was that overwhelmingly the majority of the participants, which by the way included Hampton City School students from a high school perspective who were looking to go to college and or go into the workforce directly from high school, we were looking at the data, and the majority of participants said this was very helpful. This was supportive. I had no idea that I could apply to the federal government. I had no awareness of usajobs.gov. And so, what we're learning is that when we go out and meet people where they are, they're interested in learning more about how to serve the American people and think about public service as a number one option for their career fields.
Yeah, definitely hear you with meeting people where they're at. That 7% factoid will stick with me forever. I want to go back to accessibility since when you mentioned the summit earlier, the A part of DEI and A was so big. Some leaders or agencies, organizations aren't always sure how to foster accessibility beyond physical accessibility. Can you tell us more about what an accessible work environment looks like? And is there any successful strategies you've seen agencies implement to foster accessibility?
Absolutely. Our national DEIA summit, where we elevated accessibility, was step one in our overall strategic plan for how do we provide agencies awareness of those promising and best practices in disability employment. What an accessible workplace looks like is people with disabilities, whether they are hidden or visible disabilities, are encouraged to apply, are able to receive the accommodations that they need to be successful. And so, one of the practices I would love to highlight to you is a centralized ASL functionality for agencies. And so, this is something that, for example, the GSA and an amazing DEIA senior leader, Andrea O'Neill, over there, was able to present to our CDOs and really helped our CDOs to learn how GSA created this central ASL functionality at the agency level and said, we'll support you on how you can now do this and replicate our success at GSA. And so, with the support of Deputy Administrator Katie Kale and Andrea O'Neill and the entire team, there was an entire team that implemented this and presented at our DEIA summit. But the rubber meets the road when the summit is over and we are now connecting diversity leaders across the landscape with the agencies who implemented this, like at GSA. And there's several others who've done this. We then partnered those leaders with other agencies who were interested in replicating it. And now we are in the process of having other agencies in their journey to make sure that our federal employees who identify as deaf have supports at the agency, or those who access services have supports in agencies. And now agencies are making ASL interpreters and other interpretation services available with more ease, and it's just sort of serving as a force multiplier. So that's like the largest example or most impactful example that I'm really excited to share with you and your listeners, because that's a way that the National DEIA Summit served as a force multiplier, and we're actually seeing movement in our federal agencies.
Yeah, I mean, I've gone to plenty of virtual government events recently in the past half year or so, and I've seen so many ASL interpreters at all of them. It's astounding how you're able to do that. I feel like they're always there, just helping out. As we wrap up today, we like to explore the human side of government, and you are clearly a very human person, very passionate about this kind of work. So now is an opportunity as a human to speak to the humans listening to the show. If there's someone out there considering a career in government, but could be thinking, this isn't a space I feel like I belong in, or is generally uneasy about whether they can really thrive professionally in the federal space, what do you want to tell them to let them know that they can also have a seat at the table?
Melissa, I love that question. I am hopeful and hoping that your listeners, if they don't remember anything else that I've said, is that we want them to go to usajobs.gov and just begin to explore. Step into curiosity. We're not asking you to commit. We just want you to explore the website and look at all the opportunities that are out there. And if they have questions about, for example, do I belong there? Is there a space for me? I say, heck yeah. Please go to opm.gov, and there's a suite of resources that they can access just to help themselves visualize their roles and how they could fit in. OPM is creating even resources and tools for young people to think about retirement and what decisions they need to make now so that they can comfortably retire. And just want to shout out our retirement services team and my amazing colleague, Margaret, because they implemented a retirement services handbook or guide so that our early career talent, all the way through the employee life cycle, and everyone who is even ready to retire today, have resources to think about the future. So I want to tell your listeners, if they really are interested in thinking about being successful in their future, the federal government needs them. Our American people have choices in how they want to serve. And you can certainly serve your country by going to the military, all branches, but you can also serve in public service and serve the American people in this very unique way. And if they are questioning whether or not they belong, I'm here to tell you that we want everyone to consider public service as a viable option. The prize for DEIA is belonging, fairness, and justice, and access to equal opportunity for everyone. And so, Melissa, to all the listeners out there, we want to say, just take a look, be curious. Karen Ahuja, OPM director, always says this, and I love it. And she's so right. We win on mission. And so, if any of your listeners want to do some important work that will change the face of truly how we solve problems and how we win, please consider the federal government as your next step in your career journey.
Thank you, Dr. Underwood. I feel like I should put some of those phrases and powerful statements you said on a poster and just like pass them around my neighborhood. Thanks so much. It's been such a pleasure chatting.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
I know that Dr. Underwood shared a lot of useful information that her office and partners have put together to promote DEIA across the federal workforce. We'll link to those in the show notes. We'll continue the important conversation around DEIA across federal agencies in part 2 to this episode on Thursday, August 17th. While we covered some broad strokes in DEIA today, I'm excited to share that we'll get to chat with 2 other federal leaders about the role of mentorship in fostering a supportive culture that promotes equity.
It's about having the conversation and working through your thoughts with someone that you trust and has your best interest at heart.
Our guests, Dr. Chuck Barber and Dr. Teresa Horn, are actually mentor and mentee, so it'll be a great intimate conversation about their experiences and relationship as professionals. I hope you'll tune in, and until next time, make sure you follow, subscribe, and share the show with your friends. Thanks, y'all.
Empathy Effect is a product of Forrest Marsh. You can reach us at forrestmarshmedia@forrestmarsh.com with any feedback, questions, or inquiries. If you want to know more about today's guest, are interested in participating with Forrest Marsh, or becoming part of our community, check out our show notes for more information.